This episode of There's No A in Creamy has been sponsored by Phoenix Books. Every click has a cost. In the time it takes to hear this, Vermonters will send over $1,000 to Amazon, a company built on exploiting workers and squeezing small businesses. In times like these, our sponsor Phoenix Books wants to remind Vermonters to support Main Street over Wall Street this holiday season. Shop local. Shop your values.
Everyone who thought they might ever move to Vermont, I think, decided to do that in the wake of the pandemic and how well we were doing with the control of the virus. My expectation is that this is going to be a need for quite some time. You know, again, we worked for 12 years in a very focused way and didn't even solve Burlington's problem.
Well, that's what I keep going back to, right? Is I haven't heard anyone say that saved money. I've heard quite the reverse, that it was a very expensive transition.
Right, even from the projections that we had, we said this does not save money.
Hello, Vermont. I'm Andy Julo.
And I'm Joanna Grossman.
And this is There's No A in Creamy.
Vermont politics, culture, and beyond.
Thanks for joining us.
Hello and welcome to There's No A in Creamy, episode 13.
That is correct. Of what season?
Of season 2.
Season 2.
Yeah. I
And where
like that
are we,
little
Joanna?
quiz that you did that there.
You like that?
Yeah, that was nice. It's good that you quizzed me because, we're in a different locations, maybe a little bit disorienting.
Yeah, it's Friday Night Lights. We're very
very well lit.
Are very well lit.
Yeah. We're here in the Media Factory in the TV studio.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, the radio studio felt not all that dissimilar from the skate shack, but this feels different.
There's a lot of lights and big fancy cameras and just it's totally weird. And it's a lovely space.
It is. You're looking fancier than you normally do.
I tried to bring it a little.
I didn't know we were doing that, so
no, I didn't.
I'm sitting here in a flannel shirt, but it's fine.
I just kind of felt like maybe I should bring it a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you look great. You're rocking the flannel.
Communicate that next time.
Dude, you started it.
I did.
You totally, for the record, this was Andy's idea. He said I can't come in a hoodie.
You remember that? No, I did not say. You're the one who said I can't come in my hoodie anymore. I think if we go back to the record, it will show that you thought that this meant that you couldn't come in your hoodie. And I don't think I ever weighed in on that negatively or positively. Counselor.
I think we're overplaying it a little bit.
All right.
Here we are in the Media Factory in the TV studio, and we've got a lot of people said, "Hey, we want to see more video. We want to see you guys talking," and so we are trying that out.
I've got a new table here.
Andy made a beautiful table. I'm going to post a picture on social. It is gorgeous.
It's made from my former roof.
That's so cool.
You
had a pretty roof.
It wasn't super pretty, but I stacked all these 2x8s, 2x8 by 16 boards in the corner, and I put them under a tarp, and the tarp leaked. And so when I pulled the tarp off, they were full of ants, and they had holes in them. So they're no good for using in structural purposes, but I was able to rip these down to 1x6s, lacquer them up, and they look pretty decent.
It looks great.
There we go.
Yeah, I wouldn't have known any of that.
That was a lot of detail and people probably didn't need, but...
No, they needed it.
Okay,
it's an important part of the history.
We're covering it with stickers.
Of the podcast.
Yes.
Yep. If folks want to get their stickers on our table, let us know, and we'll make that happen. We've already got a few pretty good ones.
So we had a big development last week. As we are recording this, the task force, the education redistricting task force, finished its job on November 10th.
Yep.
Is sending that report on to the legislature, and they have opted not to put 3 maps on paper.
Right.
They have instead made some recommendations, and the governor had a press conference, and he was not pleased with the result from the task force. We are going to have Martine Gulick on shortly. She's going to...
Senator Martine Gulick.
Thank you for
Chair
that.
of the task force.
Chair of the task force. No, we should be proper here. And she's going to talk to us about that process, and we're looking forward to that. But the governor used the word failure in his press conference and expressed displeasure, and just felt like there was a difference in interpretation between the governor and possibly the legislature about that task force, which I think we actually when we broke it down, that was kind of in line with what I was thinking initially when we talked about the different committees that were out there. We had the task force that would draw the lines. You would have the ward committee that would come in and figure out how do you elect school board members for these new districts. You would have the Commission on the Future of Public Education, figuring out how to close schools, which is a funny thing for a Future of Public Education committee to be doing.
Yeah,
and then the school construction,
really.
right? It is. And the school construction committee coming in and figuring out, what is our maintenance strategy? How are we going to fund building new buildings? And then the legislature would come over the top and finish that, figure out if there were problems with the districts that were set, make sure equity, quality, efficiency were all part of the system, and go from there. I will say, though, that if there was that difference of interpretation, it does seem like the governor pushed it away from what he actually wanted. If you look at his appointee to the commission, it was Dave Walk, who was president of Castleton College. He was the commissioner of education, which was the former title of the secretary of education. So he led that. He's a high-level administrator, used to really high-level thinking.
Yeah.
If you just want somebody to draw lines on a map, that's probably not the skill set that you're looking for there.
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation. Yeah. He could have just put a team together of geographic information system specialists. Well, in fact, the state has an agency. Well, it's not an agency, but it's like a department in ACCD. It's a multi-agency unit, whatever, VCGI and Vermont Center for Geographic Information. And if he really just wanted to come up with 3 different sort of, rubrics for maps, he could have just asked them for that. And I also think there's a bigger picture here of like those task force members were hearing testimony over and over again from parents and school board members and superintendents and principals and trying to act in the public interest. And I think that should supersede anything else.
Yeah, well, that seemed to be the interpretation of the legislature, is that if this doesn't actually bring us to more efficiency and if it doesn't bring us to quality, then what are we doing? And maybe we pull the plug. And if you look at their appointees, that makes sense. It's Rebecca Holcomb, high-level administrator, Kim Gleason, secretary on the State Board of Education, Senator Martine Gulick, who's been on the school board for many years.
And was an educator herself.
Right.
Yeah. And Edie.
Edie Granning, yes. Representative Edie Granning, who's been on the school board for Representative Edie Granning. Has been on the school board for many years as well. So their skill set aligned more towards making a call as to whether what they were doing on the map actually moved the needle forward. And if not, they weren't going to do it.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, the governor and many who were pushing for this advocated for more legislators on that committee than education professionals.
Yep.
And that I think that undid what they wanted to do as well. Education professionals, the School Boards Association, the Principals Association, the Superintendents Association, they actually have a history of coming up with proposals that are not popular, but have data that show that they perform better for kids.
Right.
The year-round school calendar comes to mind. That was put out by them. They had data. This is going to improve and it was panned because it was different. So who often folds when they are subjected to public pressure is politicians. So the more politicians you put on that committee, the more likely it was to pull back against public comment that showed up there. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned data because actually that's another way that the task force was steadily undermined, right? Because they were sending data requests. The task force was sending data requests to the Agency of Education and not getting the responses and content that they needed to make decisions. So if they're, I can't really fault them if they wanted to make data-driven decisions and weren't able to do so.
Right. Yeah. And Scott Beck was also on that. Senator Scott Beck was also on that task force. He's closely aligned with the governor. And I thought it was interesting when they went around the table. I mean, Scott Beck said when they asked for goals, he said, designing a governance system that makes sense, achieving excellence in all areas of the state, and provides all children with the best opportunity and options. Nothing about, I want to come out of here with 3 maps, and that's my job, and that's all we're supposed to be doing. It went to opportunities and options. So it just seemed like from the start everything was pushing this towards, if this doesn't make sense, we're not going to push forward maps that take us backwards.
Yeah, those are two very conflicting agendas.
Yes.
What's best for the state and their education needs, and drawing a bunch of maps. They're just totally different.
Totally different. Seemed to be an expectation that they would come out with maps, but when you look at how the pieces were placed on the table by everyone, including the administration, it seemed inevitable we were headed this direction.
Yeah, I think so too. I kind of think they were set up to fail. And, for the governor to say they failed, I keep coming back to, well, who failed who? I'm not convinced that the task force was trying to do the best they could for the state of Vermont. And I think we got to look at the bigger picture.
I mean, it's all predicated on the concept that if we consolidate districts, we're going to get better and we're going to get cheaper. And we've talked a lot on this about Act 46, and I have been probably guilty of throwing that around without properly defining it.
So wait, let's do a little quick glossary of shame moment.
Let's
what
do
was
it.
Act 46?
Act 46 was a law, I think it was 2014, somewhere in there, that said if you were under a certain size, you had to have conversations with your neighbors to try to form a school district of 4 or more into a single district. If you failed to do that, you could lose your small school grant. If you succeeded at doing that, you would get short-term tax incentives for 4 years. And so it did actually push quite a few districts out of business, pushed them into union districts. My district was one of them. North Hero, Grand Isle, and Isle Lamont came together. Only formed 3. We were a little under the 4 requirement, but they let us squeak through on geographic isolation.
Whole island thing going.
That's right. 2 neighbors refused, and here we are 10 years later, and those neighbors are no worse off than the union district is. So that concept of let's get bigger, let's have more scale, hasn't necessarily led to better outcomes. It hasn't achieved savings.
Well, that's what I keep coming back to, right? Is I haven't heard anyone say that saved money. I've heard quite the reverse, that it was a very expensive transition.
Right. Even from the projections that we had, we said, this does not save money. And taxpayers wanted it anyway. I don't think they believe that. Taxpayers wanted it anyway. And unfortunately, we've ended up in this situation we're at again.
Yeah.
And we're kind of looking to the same failed solution this time. And if you're going to task a task force with increased quality and increase efficiency by creating scale, there may be a fundamental flaw in that ask.
It does seem like that is the case. So in a couple weeks, we're going to have Senator Martine Gulick on with us. And as we've just established, she was also one of the co-chairs of the task force. And she's going to be talking to us about reflecting back on the task force's work and the report that they're generating and her reflections on that.
Yeah, looking forward to that. She talked to us after the Act 73 process when the legislative session was closing out, and she's very knowledgeable on this topic, and she's a straight shooter.
Yes, she is.
Yes, she is.
So Martine is an interesting pivot because Martine is one of the 3 senators for the Chittenden Central Senate slate. So back in the day, Chittenden County used to be all one big happy Senate district, and there were 6 senators. And living here, I have to say it was a weird thing to vote for because it was like check all of the above. There were just like a million names, and it was a difficult situation. Anyway, we got redistricted, and the county now encompasses technically 4 Senate districts. So most of Burlington and Winooski and Essex Junction form Chittenden Central, and then Essex Town, Westford, and Milton are bunched in with Franklin County for the Essex district. And I might not be getting the name of that district, the technical name right.
Chittenden North, right?
Is it?
I believe so.
Okay, it's Chittenden North. Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It's Chittenden North. Thank you for that.
Sure.
And then Colchester, as you know, is sequestered off with the islands, and that is the Chittenden Grand Isle district. It might actually be the other way, technically, right? Grand Isle.
It's actually just called the Grand Isle District.
Oh, it
and there
is?
is a little swath of Colchester on Route 15 that is actually part of Chittenden Central. It's not the
you would know.
entirety of Colchester,
Yeah.
but it's pretty darn close to it.
Yeah, okay. And then the rest of the county, which is quite a lot, it's the little sliver at the bottom of Burlington and then goes all the way down to Charlotte and then out to Heinsberg and Richmond is the Chittenden Southeast District. So Martine's district, the Chittenden Central District, has a three Senate slate seat. And the incumbents right now are Martine, Tanya Vyhovsky, and Phil Baruth. And it does appear, the word on the street is that there's a lot of folks coming out to challenge them. So that's going to be a pretty interesting primary that's already heating up. The word on the street is that Nikhil Goyal, who is a known sociologist who's been doing the circuit, is going to be challenging, as well as Elaine Haney. And I've heard a couple other names that are like highly unconfirmed, so I don't even want to go there. But yeah, I mean, Phil is the Senate pro tem, and so that's pretty significant because we don't have a lot of primary challenges here in Vermont.
No.
And we have two heavy hitters coming at them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. We have candidates in Orleans that have declared, not challengers, but...
Yes, open seats.
Open seats.
Yep.
Yeah. Orleans and Orange.
Right.
The Senate district so far.
Yeah, and we had Democratic Senate candidates out of the gate, it seemed like almost immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have Secretary of State Sarah Copeland-Hanses has announced she's running for re-election
Yes.
several months ago.
Yes, she did.
We have a couple people in on auditor. It's believed that Doug Hoffer will not be running for re-election.
Right. So Molly Gray just announced that she is running for lieutenant governor, seeking to get her old job back.
Yep.
And Brian McLaren has said that he is running. So there's a contested primary in LG.
What office don't we have a candidate for yet, Joanna? Conspicuously absent.
It does seem like we're missing a name at the top of the ticket.
Which is getting concerning.
It's getting concerning. I mean, for everyone at this table, really. You know, when you were running for Senate last fall and the Senate the six senators who were trying to keep those seats, it was tough to not have a really strong top of the ticket. So the Senate seats were like right on the line of fire for for Phil Scott's resources and really made us targets. And yeah, I'm worried about that happening again.
I would say tough is a very generous word. This is the most popular governor in America, was free to roam around the board with all his resources launching missiles at the Senate candidates.
Yeah.
And if we don't want that to happen again, we are only two Senate seats. If they keep the lieutenant governorship from this becoming a Republican-controlled state, they'll control the Senate and the governorship if the governor stays.
Right.
They'll have the tiebreaker vote. They flipped 6 seats last time. 2 of those have quit.
Yep.
Less than 1 year into the term.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, one because he was sounding an awful lot like the character Rolf from Sound of Music. And the second just thought the job was too hard. So that was the first wave off the bench here from Vermont Republican Party. I don't think we want to see what the second wave looks like.
Right.
We want to be competitive and we want to win these seats back.
Right.
And if you don't have a governor candidate, that becomes awfully difficult.
It does become really difficult. And it makes it hard to set the tone for the rest of the ticket. You know, it is hard. And, you know, we've heard a couple names floated around. We've been hearing that Miro Weinberger and Mike Pichak are maybe each going to get in, but they haven't. And, you know, the bottom of the ticket is starting to fill out. And I hear a lot from Democrats. I mean, everywhere I go, all the time. People are always asking me, who's going to run for governor? Who's going to run for governor? I'm like, you know what? I don't know. And and people feel very unsettled by that. And I hope we have an answer soon.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Let's make it happen.
Let's make it happen,
Make
people.
it happen.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, we've got a holiday coming up. Thanksgiving.
Yes. I'm excited about Thanksgiving this year.
Me too. We're going to travel down to see my daughter on the Marine Corps base in North Carolina. I haven't seen her in a while.
Yay.
She's allegedly going to make ham, or she's got a freezer
You
full
don't
of
have a turkey?
I think we want to try. None of us really are crazy about turkey.
Yeah,
other
I don't
than
think anyone really is.
It's tradition. It's kind of a flavorless bird.
Yeah.
But I don't know. She's got a freezer full of venison, and my son-in-law is in Michigan hunting again. So if he gets something, we might just have to do venison, which would be, I like venison.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a bad option.
No.
That's exciting. Steve's family are coming up, not right on Thanksgiving, but before Thanksgiving, and we're gonna be hosting. And since we're a vegetarian, we're having a vegetarian Thanksgiving, and they're all being very game about that. No pun intended. That
was good.
Yeah.
I have a rim shot effect somewhere on this board, but I don't know where it is.
Awesome.
We can add it in.
And we're really excited about that. But what I'm really excited about, I have to say, is that we have. So my favorite thing about Thanksgiving is the Macy's parade. Mm-hmm. And actually, one time when we lived in the city, did I tell this on another episode? One time we lived in the city.
Yes.
We cut it. I had tickets to the VIP bleachers seats for the Macy's parade when we lived in the city, and we couldn't go. And so I'm a little salty about that still, but I love the parade. I'm obsessed with it. But usually on Thanksgiving, there's all these people around and stuff, and they're distracting me. So this year, since it's going to be just Steve and Issa and I, we're going to be streaming it, and we're excited. We have some plans to make hot chocolate, and we are dedicating the day to the parade and baking cookies and some other fun things, and I am really excited about it.
Okay, we're going to come back to this topic in last licks.
Did I mess it up?
No,
okay.
It's fine. But
the balloons.
Yes, I don't know if you haven't gotten to see it recently. I don't know if you'll be ready for it. Maybe we should wait till after. Okay.
I'm ready.
Definitely. We're going to wing it.
Okay.
All right. So we have an interview today for you. It was a fun one with Miro Weinberger from Let's Build Homes, which is a new-ish organization. They've been around a little over a year. Yeah,
but I've been hearing their name everywhere.
Yeah, they were at the State House a lot last session with this idea of, I think we talked about it a little bit, of mini TIF districts for housing, and there were a lot of people that were floating that idea, and Miro's careful not to say Let's Build Homes invented it, but was one of the organizations that helped advocate for it, and they came up with a program originally called HIT, which was rebranded for being too violent to CHIP, but CHIP bears an awful lot of resemblance to HIT that Let's Build Home brought to the State House at the beginning of the session. And I will say that, and we talk about this in the interview, that it's kind of changing the way we look at water, wastewater infrastructure in the islands and opening up some doors for us. And so we're looking forward to the program. It just got finalized, and it's going to come on board soon.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it was cool to talk to Miro and hear sort of his vision. He had some really creative ideas about how to get on top of housing and create some space for it. I really enjoyed talking to him, and we hope you guys like this interview. Hello, and welcome to There's No A in Creamy, Miro Weinberger. Thank you for joining us.
I'm excited to be with you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would love to hear more about Let's Build Homes. First of all, am I the only one who wants to slide into Let's Grow Homes from the...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've actually done that a couple times inadvertently. But yeah, I actually think it's a really fun name.
Yeah, you're definitely not the only ones to do that. It kind of happens even to me occasionally. We obviously... it was part of how we got to this name, of course, is we that action oriented campaign that really dominated public policy debate in a lot of ways. It was great, and we thought there was a sort of similar opportunity here. I did clear the name with Allie Richards and let's grow kids before we committed to it, and they were happy to say yes because in a lot of ways our missions are aligned.
Very nice.
Oh, very much, yeah.
So what was the problem that you saw and wanted to tackle with this organization? How did it all come together?
The main problem, Andy, is that we have an acute housing shortage, and it's a shortage that has been sort of hard earned over decades. It's been building up in many ways since the 70s, It really spiked with the pandemic when you had some unusual things happen. Everyone who thought they might ever move to Vermont, I think, decided to do that in the wake of the pandemic and how well we were doing with the control of the virus. Vacancy rates went to almost zero. And then we've seen this really acute issue with people being pushed out of the hotel program when there are no vacancies around, and the spike in homelessness. But so that I think really made the shortage very visible to everyone. But really, this is something that has been going on for a long time. And our belief is that it's a result, a function of state and local rulemaking over the last 50 years that cumulatively has made Vermont one of the hardest places to build homes in the country. And that is the main driver of our affordability crisis within housing. When you don't have enough homes, there is intense cutthroat competition for the homes that do exist, and that is really driven up expenses to levels they are now, where home prices relative to incomes have basically doubled since the turn of the century. A quarter of all renters in Vermont pay more than half of their income in rent. We have record levels of homelessness and one of the highest levels in the country. And so Let's Build Homes is squarely focused on that problem. How do we solve the housing shortage?
One of my surprising moments in the State House this last session was I spent a lot of time in Senate Economic Development, and I was really surprised to walk up to the committee room and see the big Let's Build Homes sign right on the door. That was pretty cool. And I was curious if you could share with us a little about, what are your legislative initiatives coming up this session? Obviously, you were pretty involved last session.
Great. Yeah, we will have a active, ambitious agenda for the upcoming year. We are settling in on it after spending the summer having meetings all over the state. We called it our summer engagement sessions. We had 7 of them around the state. The highlights are coming into focus, and we're getting positive feedback on the early discussions. The big one has to do with land use, and I know Andy remembers, maybe even voted on it in the spring of 24. The state, for the first time in 50 years, an Act 250 Reform Act. It was called Act 181, and it was exciting that the legislature took action, really, and part of what they did has already actually been quite successful. It was the temporary Act 250 exemption areas have seemingly spurred quite a bit of development in housing development, in particular in different parts of the state, and really, I think, proved that there is an issue with Act 250 having a negative impact on homes getting built in the areas that we want housing. But those are temporary. And what Act 181 also did is start a process for creating permanent exemption areas. It's a process that's being led by our 11 different regional planning commissions. However, I think what is now quite clear is that the trajectory of that effort is not going to result in a lot of new housing. There are issues with the mandate that the RPCs were given, and we're going to end up with only a handful of places around the state that have full exemptions from Act 250, and even the areas with partial exemptions are going to be quite limited. We think there's a way to kind of shift the trajectory, get that back on track, make that effort one that does result in new housing opportunities statewide. And actually, I think there's an opportunity to sort of go beyond that and have these new areas which will represent consensus, really, for the first time in 50 years about where we want housing. There should be more than just Act 250 exemptions that goes along with that. We're developing a concept that have started called right to housing zones that would not only be exempt from Act 250, but they would also be local permits that are issued in those zoning overlay areas, and that's the way we're conceiving it, would also be very hard to appeal. So it would address another major problem in our existing permitting environment, permitting regime, if you will, where a lot of projects get appealed. It's very easy for abutters to appeal projects, even if there's tremendous community support for those projects. And even beyond the projects that do get appealed, there's a huge chilling effect on other projects because that's out there. So that's I'm pretty excited about that. And I think I just botched what we're calling it. We've been shifting the name around. It's right to home zones is what we're calling them. So RHZs. It's got a little Riz.
Yeah.
It's a great concept. So you're sort of trying to clear the way ahead of time.
Well, that's the way it should be done, Joanna. Don't you think? Like we should have, like we do in pretty much most parts of the way our legal system and country of laws works. Maybe the Trump administration maybe is disproving some of this, but in a lot of cases, we are a country of laws. Those laws are established up front. Nobody knows what they are going in, and then everybody can make decisions accordingly. Unfortunately, our current system of making permitting decisions about, and what we're most focused on is housing decisions. There is a big upfront planning process where zoning is set and towns create municipal plans, and there's even regional plans that are passed. And yet our current system allows individual people to have a veto on those efforts and re-litigate literally on a project by project basis what housing policies should be. And that, when you think of it that way, it's pretty clear why it doesn't work. And this is something that really can be done much better. We actually have seen an example of how this is supposed to work in Burlington in recent years. It was a major priority of mine as mayor, as someone who had an affordable housing background coming into office. One of the things we focused on throughout those 12 years was creating more housing production in Burlington. And in particular, in the downtown, we passed a downtown code that removed all subjectivity from the zoning. It got rid of these parking waivers that were subjective judgments by the DRB, whether you would get one or not. It got rid of these character of the neighborhood tests. And instead, in some ways, was more prescriptive. It said, here are rules about where the doors need to be and how buildings should relate to the streets and how much window, how much glazing you need to have. In some ways, architects don't love it. And maybe, it's a little bit micromanaging, but I'll tell you, once we passed that code in the downtown, we went from a system where literally nothing could get built without the mayor's office having to directly get involved and adjudicate arbitrations, mediations, to one where all of a sudden projects like that City West project next to August 1st, or there's a project on Hungerford Terrace. I was walking down the street one day and I realized there was this major building there that was almost complete. And I never heard anything about it up until then. It did exactly this. It got rid of subjectivity. I don't think we've had appeals since the new zoning went into place. And there's been quite a significant spike in new homes in downtown Burlington since that. So I think there's an opportunity to do something similar in terms of clarifying, removing unpredictability for statewide through an effort like this.
The regional development corporations were one of your stops this summer, and you spoke to us, and you were talking specifically about kind of a gap between home ownership, being able to afford an apartment, and then homelessness that used to exist. Boarding houses were pretty common before zoning laws became more prevalent. Is that the gap that you would hope to address by removing some of this subjectivity and character of the neighborhood that often strikes down these kind of projects?
So that is, I think, a really interesting additional issue that could be addressed in this zoning. Specifically there was a period in American history, and Vermont was part of this, where there really was an effort to kind of prohibit poverty in some ways. And that was a target of that movement, was to make boarding homes illegal. And in many cases, in many communities, they are not legal The problem is that just, issuing a mandate like that doesn't mean poverty disappears, of course. So that does take off the table a form of housing, which is really quite efficient, where you have shared kitchens, shared bathroom facilities. And I do think that there may be a number of different ways in which legalizing, reforming zoning laws so that type of housing was legal could have. It's definitely something we've been exploring. I think it could help with the homelessness problem. I think it could also help with like worker housing and with respect to like maybe migrant farming communities and even maybe sometimes construction workers. Whether there's a lot of interest in this conversation nationally. I've actually had conversations with like the Pew Foundation about this. So I would like to do something here. I have not completely honestly, Andy, put my finger on exactly how to pursue it. I'm not sure that's going to be right for this session, but I think that goes to the broader point here and why we need Let's Build Homes is there is a lot of work to do to get our rules right to fix this problem. I mean, I found, again, not to try not to go back to Burlington too much, but for 12 years we focused on. You
can, as far as I'm concerned. I'm just saying.
Well, it was a major priority for mine for 12 years. We did a lot of good work. I do think we changed the trajectory of the city, but there's a lot to be done. We are excited about what the legislature did pass last spring. Would you like the Let's Build Homes take on CHIP as well? Would that be?
Yeah,
I would.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, great. So, CHIP, which the full name is the Community Housing Infrastructure Program. Some of your listeners I think a lot of people have some awareness of another term that is related to this, which is tax increment financing. Mm-hmm. Tax increment financing or financing is something that basically every state, or maybe every state but one, has different legislation of some sort. It's a very powerful tool because essentially what tax increment financing says is that you can borrow against, what it works on is, in particularly world with a property tax system, is most property tax systems, you see a big increase in public revenues when something gets built. Certainly that's the way the Vermont system works. And because we have very high levels of property tax creation, if you go from a piece of raw land or an underutilized parcel to something with a bunch of homes on it, there is an enormous increase in revenue that will be generated by that parcel. Oftentimes, though, for that private investment to take place, there needs to be some kind of public upgrade of the public infrastructure to serve that parcel. You may have a place where you really can't build much on it unless you extend a road or upgrade a water or sewer system, extend sidewalks. And that can present something of a catch-22 because that upfront infrastructure cost can be a major obstacle to the development ever taking place and these revenues ever being realized. So what actually financing does in a kind of elegant way is to say municipalities and builders can borrow against that new revenue for an extended period of time to pay for that upfront infrastructure. So that's the idea. It's a powerful idea. Up until this year, Vermont made it harder to use that type of financing than any other state, hands down. I mean, we had a complication to it that is was massive. You have to go through multiple public votes before you could do this. You our system required you to map out whole districts, which could involve hundreds of different parcels. There was involvement from the state auditor. There were tests that need to be made, but-for tests that were quite complicated to meet. I mean, there's a whole range of complications that made it hard to use. And honestly, I think if people are being honest about it, it was kind of intentionally made hard because there was some thinking by certain factions in Montpelier that said, we don't really want this tool used because it will rob money from the education fund. What happened last spring is that Let's Build Homes played a leading role with others. There was a big coalitional effort in saying, let's look at this with fresh eyes. Let's look at this as a housing issue. And when we have consensus that we're not building nearly as many homes as we need to be, does it really make sense to block the use of this tool because you're concerned about it being used too much and being abused? There's not enough development happening. That's the whole problem. So let's make this easier to use. And that argument carried the day, and we went from that situation of being probably the hardest TIF legislation in the country to use to now, I think, one of the strongest TIF bills in the country. The rules are still being final. Well, actually, a bunch has happened since the end of the legislative session. Just last week, VEPC, the Vermont Economic Progress Council, voted to adopt guidance for this. And I think we really are headed in a very positive direction now, where many communities, including quite small communities around the state, where if they want to see housing growth, they will be able to partner with, municipalities will be able to partner with builders, and they will be able to make these agreements on a parcel by parcel, project by project basis. It'll be a much simpler transaction, but still a powerful one that may, in many cases, I believe, will be the difference between a project happening and not happening. And that's why we see it as an important tool for addressing the housing shortage.
Yeah, we're already seeing it changing the conversation out here in Grand Isle County, because prior to that, there really was no financing available unless you were bringing it to businesses. It was not about homes were a disqualification. So this has changed that equation. Whereas if you are building housing, you are eligible for some kind of public funding to bring the pipes to those homes.
That's exciting to hear, Andy. And I've heard that same thing. I mean, I've been stunned by the fact that like Chelsea is looking at a 100-home development using CHIP. I know Jonah Richard and all the stuff he's doing up in the Northeast Kingdom. They're looking at CHIP opportunities up there. So it's great to hear that there's some excitement around it in Grand Isle. Yeah, I think a lot of municipalities used to be in the business of working with builders to grow. That was the way we used to think that was kind of the job of municipalities. A lot of the history of cities and towns is that they were formed in large part to be kind of partners to the private sector to grow. But we've really gotten away from that over recent decades, both because of ambivalence about environmental impacts of growth, but also I do think the statewide property tax and inadvertent, and I certainly am a defender of the concepts behind Brigham and the need to provide an equal education to all of our children. I think an unintended consequence that hasn't fully been grappled of that is that you kind of took most of the property tax value from localities and it became a state resource, and municipalities cease to have that incentive to be working with builders to grow. So I think we had kind of muscles that atrophied over the last 30 years or so, and CHIP, I think, really on a broad scale might bring them back, and I'm excited about that.
So we had a little bit of a surprise in September. The governor issued an executive order. He talked about reducing buffers, eliminated some permitting, changes to the energy standards, and we didn't hear a lot back about that out in the legislative land. And I'm sort of curious how that landed with Let's Build Homes and your thoughts about that.
Well, we supported it. We put out a statement when it came out. We were not really involved in the drafting of it. We did support it when it came out, and I've made that clear to the media and some follow-up. I mean, I will say one of the big critiques of it is that the governor has exceeded his authority in certain areas. We weren't really weighing in on that. I think that gets into sort of technical legal issues that kind of go beyond what we can weigh on. I guess what we welcomed about it is this: certainly in our system, the governor, the executive branch, has very significant authority and responsibility to make various government systems that relate to housing permitting and construction to make them run well. And what I saw in the governor's executive order is the governor kind of taking full responsibility for those agencies and for making sure those agencies are focused on this goal of building housing, and that they will seek to support what I think many people think is the most important state goal right now, which is to do something about this housing shortage. Certainly I felt as the mayor of Burlington, that is part of the chief executive's role, to try to get all the different agencies rolling in the same direction to the degree possible, to set those goals in a visible and strong way, so that in the case of Burlington, hundreds of people working for the city, but for the state, thousands of people working for the city are clear that this is something they're trying to work towards. So from that perspective, I thought it was a helpful EO that could have a real impact in, for example, in the way the DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, administers some of its wetlands permits or its environmental cleanup efforts. There's a lot of judgment and discretion given to those agencies, and I think the EO is helpful in clarifying what the goals should be.
So plenty to do right now. You've got an agenda for 26. You've got to make sure CHIP rolls out successfully. What's the long-term future for Let's Build Homes? Do you envision this as a permanent organization, or is it kind of a surge of a few years to tackle this crisis and then maybe hand it off?
Yeah, great question. And it's recently been on my mind in that Let's Grow Kids, where our conversation started, they very intentionally were set up as a time-limited initiative, and they're actually closing shop right now. I think like tomorrow, maybe their last day or something like that. I think it's too soon to say what the long-term future is for Let's Build Homes. I would say this: we are building it as if it's going to be around for a while. We have formally incorporated as a 501c4 that has a policy advocacy lobbying arm. We will have a C3 subsidiary as well soon. We have built a board that I'm really proud of that has people from all across the state and many different sectors of the state. We have bankers and hospital leaders and builders, nonprofit and for-profit builders. There's an interesting example out there that speaks to this issue a little bit as well, which I think about a lot. One of the reasons I got involved in starting this group is that I, for 30 years, have thought we needed something like this. And I date it with some precision there, in that I was in graduate school, getting a planning degree in urban planning and public policy degree back in the 90s. And, somewhat stunning when you get to the point in life where you're saying 30 years ago I was doing this. But so 30 years ago, I was in grad school, and I read about Oregon's urban growth boundary policies, which I've always thought was an interesting comparison to Vermont, right? They had the same development pressures happening out there that we had here at the same period when the environmental movement was ascendant and people were sort of waking up to various negative things we were doing to the land. And Vermont's response to that was Act 250, right? Which put this kind of blanket standard in place that didn't really distinguish between places we really wanted to protect versus places that we wanted to see evolution and growth in. Oregon did do that. The urban growth boundaries called on every municipality to create a boundary that within the boundary, growth would be encouraged and facilitated, and it was supposed to be made easy. Outside the boundary, it was supposed to be harder. And the Republican governor got that passed. A year after he left office, he set up something called 1,000 Friends of Oregon, which was a nonprofit advocacy group set up to defend that idea, because he knew it was going to be attacked from the left and the right. And it has been. There's been lawsuits and statewide referenda and all sorts of battling over time. But 50 years later, the urban growth boundaries are still around. They still play an important role in land use out there. I would say Oregon has done a better job than Vermont. While they certainly have big problems out there, they've seen a lot more housing built in that period than we have. And you know what else is still around 50 years later? Thousand Friends of Oregon is still around as a very robust and community organization, and it's actually it's quite impressive what it's grown into and become. So, I think while in some sense I would like nothing more than for us to solve this issue and Let's Go Build Homes could pack up shop like Let's Grow Kids has. On the other hand, I think these are issues. You look around the landscape today and you have a Vermont Land Trust that has, 50 plus people, I think, working there. And you have the Vermont Natural Resources Council, VNRC, and you have Vermont Historic Preservation Trust. You have all these very worthy causes. They have very robust staff, professionalized staff that does that work. I think it's been a gap up until now that there has been no comparable broad pro homes entity that is taking, making the case, voicing in an organized, consistent, lasting way the need for homes. And I think we're going to need that voice for some time to come.
So one of the challenges has been workforce, though, is that we have too small a workforce for building homes than we have a demand for building homes. Do you anticipate Let's Build Homes getting into that or starting to push for initiatives to build up our building workforce?
Yeah, I do think that workforce is part of the problem for sure, and definitely heard that in certainly in different parts of the state, starting in southern Vermont, that came up a lot, central Vermont. This is one of the kind of virtuous cycles that would happen if we got housing production levels up, is that construction workers would have more housing options as well. It's right. A little bit, there's something kind of cyclical about it. But beyond that, there are specific workforce challenges within construction that are clear. I think the average, I don't have the stats in this area is totally at command, but the construction workforce has been aging dramatically for a long time. We need to find a way to get younger folks into these trades again. Greater investment in technical education and is certainly something that could have a big impact on the construction sector, and that is probably not something that Let's Build Homes will lead the charge on, but I could certainly see us being part of a coalition to push for greater investment in technical education.
Good question. We just had Matt Musgrave on a few weeks back, and he was talking about the Vermont Construction Academy, and it just sounds like they're bursting at the seams already because there's so much demand for that.
I do think there's some positive things happening in this space. AGC, the Association of General Contractors, also has a very robust training facility down outside of Montpelier, and a ton of activity and expansion of classes and offerings there. I have some hope in this area. It seems to me, especially as the job market has been getting tougher of late, I think you have a lot more younger folks actually looking at the trades as an option than maybe was happening 5-10 years ago. So, ironically, maybe this will be one of the areas that is touched less by AI and some of the other technological developments. I do think this is an area where there's real positive change that is happening, and that could, and it's very much needed. I mean, competition for, as we said at the beginning, we see as a major driver of housing cost, but the construction costs are an important driver as well. And it is going to be really hard to make a dent in the affordability if, it's costing $500 a square foot. Another area that we're looking at, we think there's real potential in, is state reforms that make it easier for factory-built housing, modular housing to succeed. That has real cost-saving potential as well, and there's a lot of energy going into that conversation these days as well.
All right, you and I are both Burlingtonians. And we were curious. So the governor has laid out this action plan for Burlington. As a former mayor of Burlington, you made a huge impact on Burlington. And we're sort of curious about your thoughts about the plan. Do you think it's going to be helpful for the state? Do you know of precedent for this kind of thing?
Listen, I think it's a good thing for Burlington, for the governor's administration to be fully engaged in the public safety challenges happening. There's no doubt that state action and state policy has an impact on what happens in the city. I certainly, while I think the city needs to lead the way in taking responsibility for community safety, public safety, I think it's a top responsibility. I always viewed it as the first responsibility of the mayor's office. It is really hard to succeed at that with the challenges we have right now if you don't have an active partner from the state. And it seems like this plan represents a overdue move towards partnership. So yeah, I'm hopeful about it. I think it's the thing that jumped out at me about it and that felt new and like it could have a real impact is if this special prosecutor or special, is it prosecutor or judge that will deal with the backflow. It seemed like a surgical effort to address this long-standing challenge that you have a very small number of individuals that are recidivists that are creating problems again and again, and our current system. This brings attention to that issue in a way that's needed, and some new resources, and I'm particularly hopeful about that.
Last question, mine?
Yeah, you get the last question.
All right. We are curious what your creamy order is when you go to a creamy stand.
Well, I got to say, it's an order you can't make at every creamy stand, but the ones that offer this, I try to make a special note of. I love the dipping, the hard shell chocolate dip. And, I feel like it's gotten a little bit, that's sort of old school and a little bit out of favor. And, but if you guys, if the podcast can help bring that back, I'd be appreciative.
It was like a late 80s, early 90s fad, wasn't it?
I didn't realize it was a fad. I thought it was like a staple of soft serve / creamy life, but there aren't many places that do it.
It's
now.
hard to find.
Yeah, well, isn't that so? Representative Bishop, Doug Bishop, he's a friend of ours because he's from Colchester, and we have friends who aren't from Colchester, but I'm just saying. He texted us a few weeks ago with it was a photo of a dip top. That's what we called it in my hometown, a dip top. And he was like, why aren't you guys covering this? This is the only way to have a creamy. So you and Doug are great minds think alike situation.
Well, how about that? Doug and I, we were both, I first met Doug over 30 years ago when we were both interns. And I was an intern. He was actually working in Senator Leahy's office in DC. So, maybe it was something about that experience that
That's
pushed
so cool.
us in the dip top direction.
Oh, right.
That's
And you were mayor when he was running the Y too, right? So you must have interacted a ton then. Yeah.
Yeah, I've known Doug for a long time, but did not know his creamy preferences until now. I'll look forward to talking to him about that.
He was quite emphatic about it.
Yes, he was. Yeah, he's the best. We love him. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Ro, and for all your service to the state now and previously. It's pretty extraordinary.
Thank you.
Hey, well, thank you guys. Thanks for doing this. It's a great addition to the community, and look forward to hearing more of the podcast, and maybe coming back again when we got some more news with Let's Build Homes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. I'm excited.
You're excited?
We haven't done a Last Licks in a long time.
We have not.
Yeah.
Welcome to Last Licks.
I like it.
All right, I've got a Thanksgiving-themed one for you today.
Okay.
All right. So, in a world where you've got those tickets to sit in the bleachers at the Macy's
I've been
Thanksgiving
to the parade, just not in the VIP bleachers.
Okay.
Okay.
I have to.
Yeah, you've been
I've
there
been
too.
to the parade long
Yes.
time ago,
No.
and I do not believe I was in the VIP bleachers.
That's okay.
Yeah. You can pick 3 balloons or floats from any era to be in the parade. What are you picking?
Snoopy is always, I love Snoopy. So that's my real answer for you, is just anytime the Snoopy float. So when Issa was little, they used to say Snoofy, like with an F, Snoofy. And so we'd always be like, it's Snoopy. And now every time we see Snoopy, we have to say that. And then this isn't exactly an answer, but I will say I really like to see what musical acts from our childhood have been dug up to be on some corporate sponsored float, and they're not current artists, they're just Issa will be like, who is that? And Steve and I are like, no way. And so that's the other thing I really love.
What MC Hammer is?
Yeah, right, totally.
Right.
And then the third category I would say of floats that I really like is the opposite, is the new music and the soloists, and then the weather will be terrible and they'll totally be out there doing their thing, and I'm always like, right on, that's yeah, they're not home with their family that day. They're getting snowed on in the middle of a parade, and respect.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I like how they always play the studio track when they sing
they're
the song.
totally lip syncing.
Oh, totally.
Yeah,
Andy Williams will be out there barely able to walk down the street, and they're playing his 1960 whatever recording of It's Wonderful. Yeah, most wonderful time of the year.
Yes, I also love that. I'm always scrutinizing them, they're lip syncing. Show me your lip syncing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, mine are.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what are yours?
I'm a traditionalist, so I love Tom the Big Turkey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
It's Thanksgiving when I see him. Kermit the Frog has always been my favorite childhood character.
That's such a good one.
I miss that. I'm less motivated to watch the parade now that Kermit isn't in the parade anymore.
Is he retired?
Yeah, several years now.
Why?
This next generation will not adopt the Muppets. They just can't seem to get it off the ground. It's going to die with us Gen Xers. The whole franchise.
That's not okay with me.
I mean, Disney's trying. They keep turning out new shows, new attractions, new movies, but they just don't take off.
I love the Muppets.
Yeah, right? All right, and then the last is, of course, Santa Claus. That's the flip over to the holiday season.
These are popular, greatest hits.
Yes, when it comes to holidays, I'm much more mainstream. Everything else, I obstinately pick the opposite. You're rooting for the Yankees, I'm going to root for the Mets. Or you're drinking Coke, I'm going to drink Pepsi. But when it comes to the holidays, I'm a traditionalist and very mainstream.
You went for the comfort food.
I did. Although I may be eating venison on Thanksgiving Day this year.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we hope everyone has a lovely Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
And let us know what your favorite floats are. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode.
Thank you all for listening.
Follow us between episodes for the latest updates on our socials at There's No A in Creamy on Instagram, Substack, and Blue Sky.
And catch us on our next episode of There's No A in Creamy, Vermont Politics, Culture, and Beyond in Apple Podcasts and Spotify.